Now, while past COP conferences have focused largely on emissions reduction pledges, the meetings at Sharm el-Sheikh have included some hard talk about hard cash. For the first time, the notion of loss and damage has made it onto the agenda. That involves richer nations compensating developing countries for past environmental damage. Earlier, the World Bank announced a new financing facility to specifically address loss and damage. But activists have accused the US of foot dragging. For more on this, let's cross over to London and speak to Arise correspondent Laurie Laird. Good to see you. Laurie, let's start with that analysis, I think from the UN, which says that $2 trillion a year will be needed for developing and emerging countries to help fight climate change. I mean, where's that money going to come from when the richer countries have been struggling to get $100 billion together that was promised 15 years ago?
Absolutely, Charles. That is the essential question. And Leila did touch upon that in her excellent conversation with you just a few moments ago. That report did come out today. It comes from Sir Nicholas Stern, who is one of the most highly regarded climate change economists. And his work, when it comes out, is usually very, very highly regarded. Yes, 2 trillion is what Professor Stone thinks that we need, but we have to look in two ways at this. One is, Charles, looking at compensation for nations that are already suffering. And we saw no better example of that than those devastating floods in South Africa over April that essentially, clogged up the economy. Also, some of the flooding that we are seeing in Pakistan, which has just been so devastating for the people involved. That comes under a sort of a compensation area. And this is what has become so very contentious. This loss and damage provision made it to the agenda, as you said earlier, for the very first time at a COP conference. This involves richer nations giving direct reparations to nations that are already suffering. That will be money that will be very, very difficult to get nations to cough up. In fact, we understand that the U.S. has been accused of dragging its feet. Apparently, John Kerry, the U.S. climate envoy, really did not want any sort of loss and damage on the agenda at this COP and is lobbying for conversations over this issue to last for another 2 years. And I think getting people to cough up for that kind of stuff will be very, very difficult. As for investing in the future of generation, investing in cleaner energy, I think there is a role for the private sector to get involved there, of course, with government guarantees and governments, ensuring private companies against losses. But I think the private money is there for future projects. It will be getting people to cough up for damage already caused. It's going to be extremely tricky.
And Laurie, is part of the difficulty that the West is also insisting that the richer developing countries such as India, Brazil and China should put their shoulders to the wheel as well? I mean, I'm wondering how much that is leading to a fundamental divide, because those three countries are considered developing countries and don't have to pay any money to support other countries.
Absolutely. It's very, very difficult. Although India, over the past 6 months or so, can really point to massive investment in renewable energy. And India, in some parts of a very vast continent, has a lot of potential for solar power, a lot of potential for wind power. India has really, with government support, put a lot of money into renewable energy. But again, it's this question, Charles, about compensating countries for damages already done during the industrialization of rich countries that have already caused damage to the environment. So these are slightly two different conversations. And I think the much more contentious one will be how to compensate countries that are feeling the effects of climate change without having benefited from industrialization.
And we've got about a minute, Laurie. Of course, I suppose the worry from the West is that this could potentially be a blank check that they may be writing, because who knows how long climate change problems could go on for and what the eventual bill could be.
Absolutely. And that is a worry. But I think Leila really hit on one of the most important points is that we have seen so much in the way of pledging. We have not seen rich nations make good on their pledges. There have been a couple of pledges that have come out today on that loss and damage clause. The World Bank has said that it intends to set up a fund. Germany says that it's willing to pledge 170 million, Austria another 50 million. But the question is, pledges are one thing. How does this money how is it allocated from national budgets? How is it decided as to which countries are most in need of this sort of compensation? Pledges are one thing, but getting the money on the ground is an entirely different thing.
Laurie, thanks very much indeed. Laurie Laird, a Rice correspondent, with her analysis of what's emerging financially from COP27.